activity is part of the gLOCAL Evaluation Week 2021, which is being held from May 31st to June 4th under the theme Sharing Local and Global M&E Knowledge. The CEI has joined with similar organizations around the world to participate in this initiative. The title of today's session is M&E Capacities to Achieve the SDGs in a Post-Pandemic Environment. And I'm now going to introduce our panelists. So our distinguished panel of experts today comprise evaluation professionals from the Caribbean and North America. Our first panelist is Silvia Salinas Mulder, President of International Organization for Cooperation and Evaluation. Silvia is a Bolivian senior consultant and evaluator whose work involves inclusion, gender, generational rights, ethnic and cultural and governance issues, and she has experience at the global, regional, and national levels. Our second panelist is Ada Ocampo, President, International Development Evaluation Association. Ada is a sociologist from Peru with a master's degree with distinction in development planning and management by the University of Wales, UK. She has worked in the United Nations system since 1990 with various UN organizations in different countries and regions. She has also lectured at various universities, including Carleton University in Canada, Glasgow in Chile, Indian School of Business in India, and BRAC in Bangladesh. She's the author of several articles and publications. She has co-authored Eval SDGs for 5 years. She's one of the founders of the International Organization for Cooperation and Evaluation and of the Latin American Evaluation Network, RELAC. Ada retired from UNICEF in November 2020. She currently leads the International Development Evaluation Association, IDES. Our third panelist is James Melanson, Head Office of the Independent Evaluation, Caribbean Development Bank. As head of CDB's Office of Independent Evaluation since 2017, James leads a small team in generating evaluation knowledge to improve programs and promote accountability for results. Working with regional and international evaluation consultants, OEI prepares reports on the bank's major sectors, teams, and country programs. In recent years, these have included reviews of policy-based lending, gender equity, disaster management, technical assistance, and support to the private sector, as well as country program assessments for Haiti, Barbados, Suriname, and the OECS countries as a group. OEI is currently reviewing how well CDB manages for development results. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Tom Grayson, President, American Evaluation Association. Ada, why did this come up on my slide? Tom is retired from the University of Illinois, where since 1999, he has been Director of the Evaluation and Assessment Office in the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and was an adjunct professor in the College of Education. Tom has provided evaluation capacity training to over 200 federally funded transition programs for individuals with disabilities. He was an evaluation consultant with the Illinois State Board of Education with responsibilities for evaluating educational policy and programs for incarcerated juveniles in the Department of Corrections. He received his PhD in education psychology from the University of Illinois, his MSc in instructional technology from Syracuse University, and his BA in psychology from Rutgers University. He has been an active member of AEA since 1990. And last but not least, our fifth panelist is our very own President of Caribbean Evaluators International, Valerie Gordon. Valerie is a monitoring and evaluation specialist with 12 years in the field and over 25 years experience in international development and environmental management. She has undertaken evaluations for UNDP, UNEP, UNESCO, CDB, UK Aid, and the European Union. Before I commence and allow our panelists to start their presentations, I would like to outline the protocol for today's webinar. Participants and panelists who have just joined are asked to kindly mute their microphones, and it might also be helpful if we can turn off all videos to preserve bandwidth connectivity. Each presenter will have 12 minutes to present. Presenters will be given a 5-minute and a 1-minute reminder prompt by my technical assistant, either Eva or Kenal. Ada, can you just ring the bell so that all our presenters can hear what it will sound like?
Did you hear the bell?
No, I didn't.
Did you hear it now?
I heard it, but I think very, 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 very low.
I'm sorry, Nadine. I inadvertently muted you. Can you unmute yourself? There was a noise in the background we were trying to get rid of, but go ahead.
Okay, Ada, can you try ringing the bell again? Ava, sorry. Can you try ringing the bell again? Let's see if we're hearing it.
Okay.
That's much better. Thank you. I am not sure what is happening here with all of this graphical element on the PowerPoint. Okay. All questions will be taken at the end of the session. Audience, please type your questions into the chat, clearly indicating if your question needs to be directed to a specific panelist. Alternatively, if you prefer to speak live, please turn on your microphone and do so during the question and answer period. We love to hear voices, especially in this environment. So I'll now turn over to our first presenter, who is Silvia Salinas Mulder, President, International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation. And I'm just going to stop my share screen so Silvia can share her screen.
Thank you, Nadine, and good afternoon. And thank you, Valerie, for the invitation. I hope that everybody can see my slides now. And well, maybe we have some guest that is very creative and does some decorations on the slides. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but anyhow, it's really an honor to be part of this panel this afternoon, and it's really also a pleasure to share it with other friends and colleagues. So I will start with my presentation that I have titled Rethinking and Recreating Evaluation and Our Role as Change Actors, because I think I'm speaking in a way with two hats. On one hand as evaluation practitioner, and on the other hand as, and I will turn my camera off, as now, yes, president of IOCE, and until last May, I was also general coordinator or chair of the regional VOPE, the RELAC. So my perspective is somehow mixed in terms of rethinking our role, rethinking also the competencies. I think when we speak now about evaluation, it doesn't only mean to address our role as practitioners, but all what is meant in terms of evaluation activism, in terms of all the evaluation architecture, in terms of global and regional dialogue. So there are multiple roles that are now embedded and very important to when we think and want to rethink and recreate evaluation and also our role as change actors. Let me just say it's not. Okay, I think in this moment, and well, with Bolivia going through the third wave of COVID-19, there are three concepts that for me are important and relate to, in a way, daily life, but also to our work in evaluation and as evaluations, which are resilience, adaptation, and reinvention, going, so to say, from the basics to the more complex processes. And I also like to share, well, maybe this is also a quote from Michael Quinn Patton that many of you have heard, but it is good also to share, to remind us all that we have now the challenge and to become all what he says, developmental evaluators, that we need to be capable of adapting to complex dynamic systems, preparing for the unknown, for uncertainties, for turbulence, lack of control, non-linearities, and for emergence of the unexpected. We are going through VUCA times, right? This is the current context around the world in general, and this is the world in which evaluation will exist for the foreseeable future. So this is what some people like to call the new normality. So this is also from Blue Marble publication, and this also brings me to the question that I want to share with you is, what has really changed, and are we able to change, to really respond to a context that has dramatically changed and will continue changing and surprising us in the near future? So I think for me, and I think it's also not a very easy thing for us as evaluators, particularly, to think about our mindsets, and what we need to change in terms of our mindsets and our certainties, our truths, and what we have predicted and what we have applied in the past. So I think for me, it is a moment that we really need at an individual, but also at a collective level, to analyze our mindsets as evaluators, as practitioners, but also as evaluation leaders and, well, change managers in a way in our organizations. So it is very important and it is needed that we move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, to a mindset that is more humble and that is more open also to failure and learning. So we need, when we think about the SDGs, we need new mindsets to arrive to new results. We already all know that we are far behind from the expected advancements and the expected goals in 2030, that for example, in terms of gender equality and the goals that we wanted to achieve, there is a 100-year. We still need 100 years if we continue at the pace that we have been moving forward until now. So we won't reach most of the SDGs by 2030, but we have the chance to still accelerate the pace and move forward faster with some important changes in our practice and that will also influence other practices. So before I start sharing with you the 10 competencies that I would like to propose, which are maybe nothing new, but that I would like to put in our agenda for reflection and discussion today, is that we really need to focus on evaluation for transformation, and we need to focus for that on self-transformation for evaluation. So it is a two-way process, and there is no way that we can continue or that we can move towards our competencies and our traditional ways of doing and ways of, yes, evaluating. So one first competency that I would like to bring to the discussion today is learning, right? We know that we now have added learning to monitoring and evaluation and learning, but in my experience in very recent actually evaluations, regional, global evaluations, national evaluations, this is more a discourse don't have learning organizations. And despite even the COVID and what it all has brought, and the you know, the all what it has meant for some people, some leaders and organizations, the trend is not necessarily to be more humble and learn, which also implies, and which is more, what is more, sometimes more important, are learning and relearning. So learning, we need to bring this further to our organizations, and we need to move from individual to organizational learning. The second important competency has to do with leadership and with leading, but with leading from another different perspective. From a perspective, okay, I think I hear the bell, thank you. From the perspective of transformational leadership, which has to do with intellectual stimulation, with individualized consideration, with idealized influence, and with inspirational motivation, which I have also captured as some of them as individual competencies. The third competency, and speaking in the most, Latin America and the Caribbean are the most unequal regions in the world. So, and the word inclusion is a word that we use quite a bit, but I think if we need to think it in our practice and in our VOPES, we need to really think further what it really implies to speak about inclusion in our world. Just a small example, we had the opportunity to have the 30 Indigenous evaluators sponsored for the Canadian Evaluation Society conference that recently took place. Well, we didn't manage to bring a list of 30 Indigenous evaluators. There are not so many Indigenous evaluators in our region.
Silvia, we are not hearing your audio anymore.
Okay, somehow can you hear me now? I didn't do anything, but.
Yes, please, we're hearing you now.
Okay, thank you for. So empathy and flexibility, we need to integrate it in our practice, but we also needed to integrate it in our networks and organizations. Inspiration and motivation, right? This is also very, very important. If we see our role also, we are all here in a way leaders, and not only from formal roles, but leaders in the ecosystem, in the evaluation ecosystem. For me, one very important thing, and this is a personal bias, is building and managing alliances. I think today we have a very rich and very complex ecosystem of different initiatives, organizations, all kinds of projects, very, very interesting, very vibrant, very dynamic. But how difficult it is to move from competition to collaboration, to open cooperation, to openness, to really, collaborate, to really share and to do things together, so that 1 + 1 is not only 2, but 3. It is really, really a very challenging aspiration. So it relates to the previous. Another competency from my perspective is co-creation and innovation. I think innovation is a key word, also maybe one of the most used words currently, but innovation has a transformation in its DNA. And we need to innovate not only in the ways of doing evaluation, in our evaluation paradigm. I also think we need further to develop our competencies related to empowerment, but also to disempowerment. We need to rethink the evaluation architecture. We need to rethink the funding of evaluation. We need to rethink how and who takes the decisions about evaluation, what is evaluated, to which extent it is evaluated, and everything. Okay, I think I have 1 more minute or 2, I can remember, but I think I only have 2 more slides. And ninth, I would like to address the issue of success. I think in evaluation, sometimes we have an obsession with success. And of course, the people that hire us to do evaluations also have an obsession, and it is all a chain that is obsessed of actors that really wants to show success. I think it is very, very important to address success, and it is also what we need to scale up, what we need to bring also to move forward to the SDGs. But we have to be aware that not everything that shines is gold, or not everything that glitters is gold. And also related to this, we really need to rethink sometimes our indicators and what they really indicate. Sometimes complying with indicators and being successful in terms of indicators can mean that the whole essence of a program, the whole transformational power has been lost. And I have some experiences that I can share with you in relation to gender and women empowerment. And finally, this is the last slide. I think we need to move from cross-cutting to really active, effective equality. If you see the terms of reference, if you see the programs also, it is with a gender perspective, with a human rights perspective, and neither the program nor the evaluation can really bring, to a concrete, visible, tangible, let's say, expression what it means to have this cross-cutting approaches. I know they are very important, and there are some tools and good practices that we have tried out to really make them have these cross-cutting approaches, but really trying to think, okay, how will this look like in the evaluation? So thank you very much. And
Thank you, Sylvia. Very, very interesting. We will, however, hold all questions until all the presenters are finished. So our second presenter will be Ada Ocampo from IDES. Please go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. It is a pleasure to be with you. My name is Ada Ocampo, as it has been mentioned before. I am the current president of the IDEAS Global Network, which is a network that promotes evaluation at different levels, and lately has been concentrated in the topic evaluation for transformational change. We are about to launch 2 books, and stay tuned, they will be announced and through the different networks, and I hope that they are seen as contributors to the global knowledge on evaluation. The title of my presentation today, and allow me to share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. In order to keep the network stable, I will shut off my video by the moment. Okay.
Can you put it into slideshow mode, please?
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you. Okay, the title of my presentation today is Supporting Countries to Accelerate Progress Towards the SDGs, an undeniable priority. So this is, as you all know, this is no news. Unfortunately, it's very well known that we are facing an unprecedented global humanitarian crisis. Many people try to call it a health crisis, but it's actually considered to be a humanitarian crisis, because by the moment, the current global crisis has led to devastating economic, social, and political effects. So nobody can deny that. And nobody can also deny the effects that this global crisis is also the effects that is causing to the environment, which is important also to mention. And the crisis is hitting hard the most vulnerable all over the world. And with the recent initiation, especially in the South, because we know that in the North, there are some countries that are well advanced, but with the recent initiation in the South of vaccines rolled out, the world is about to begin its transition from the initial response to the crisis phase to that of a recovery from the unprecedented effects of this pandemic. So countries will need to transition from response to recovery while ensuring that no one is left behind. However, do we have the evidence to know whether we are responding to the crisis or moving from response to recovery in an equitable way? Well, that's still a big question mark. In 2015, 20 countries all around the world adopted the 70s SDGs as a transformative universal framework to address 3 interconnected dimensions of our existence: people, planet, peace, and prosperity, and of course, partnerships. We have the 5 P's of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Only SDG 3 focuses primarily on health. However, many others, environment, nutrition, hunger, sustainable production and consumption, agriculture, education, and others, also have a big effect on health. In addition, SDGs 5, 10, 17, and others are cross-cutting. And this means that the SDGs in the current pandemic cannot be more relevant, are absolutely relevant, and we shouldn't forget the commitment that countries have signed around the 2030 Agenda. SDGs represent a key platform to move towards sustainable, substantive, and real change, and that is our long-term goal, even though that the crisis has affected the progress countries were making towards the SDGs. Actually, countries are currently at risk or not achieving or even not making progress towards the SDGs in general. So there is a global call for accelerating action towards the SDGs, and evaluation is to play a role in this global call for action. Let's see how and why. So we know that countries are working to respond and mitigate the crisis with different approaches and varying results. Mitigation efforts are meant to be universal while prioritizing the most vulnerable groups of society. However, as I mentioned before, is there evidence on which groups are benefiting from mitigation efforts and in which proportion? Is there evidence on equal access to benefits and services? Currently, for example, there is a global discussion about equal access to vaccines, and there are organizations working to support countries to achieve that, working to denounce causes of unequal access, working to advocate for a global, more equal access. But we don't yet have the evidence. Are mitigation and response efforts being effective? Are decisions being made on evidence? So we don't have information that will allow us to respond these questions. And therefore, we need evaluation, and evaluation ensures that we will get well-informed, timely, and credible evidence. Of course, evaluation is not the only source of evidence. We have some other sources of evidence. I'm just highlighting the fact that evaluation is one important source of evidence. Therefore, evaluations are to play a key role for informed decision-making in the transition from response to recovery phase and for accelerating progress towards the SDGs. That was the bell, right?
Yes, it was. That's 5 minutes.
Okay, no problem. So, evaluation and SDGs acceleration, it's a shared responsibility where different actors have a role to play and not only the countries. Of course, countries have to be at the driver's seat, but we need different actors to remain accountable and to play a role. Let's highlight the role of two actors and what we are proposing them to do. We are proposing that countries undertake evaluations for good governance with the purpose to demonstrate good governance. It means to demonstrate accountability towards the response to the crisis and towards the SDGs. Countries are reporting on how they're responding to the crisis, and each year they report about their progress to the SDGs. But is this reporting based on evaluative evidence? In very, very rare cases. So there is also a need for countries to allocate resources for evaluation, even in this crisis. So given the importance, there is a trade-off between allocating resources and really making decisions, policy decisions that are based on evidence. We also are asking countries, advocating for countries to join global or regional efforts to enhance the efforts towards advocating for evidence-based policy decisions, and to demand from international organizations and development organizations in general for evaluation development capacity support. We are also asking in our advocacy campaigns for development organizations to walk the talk. This means to, among other things, to prioritize acceleration efforts, including evaluation, engage with countries for joint evaluations, and prioritize national evaluation capacity development support. It's important to remember that there is a commitment towards, from development organizations and especially the UN agencies, there is a commitment towards supporting countries to achieve the SDGs. And now that the countries are at risk, the commitment has to be really, really clear, evident, and effective. So looking ahead, I will just like to signal some important activities that need to be done in order for evaluation not to be left behind, because there are many conversations at the moment saying, well, this is not time for evaluation, there are some other priorities. Wrong. There is a time, this is a time where many decisions that will have important consequences are being taken and continue being taken without evidence. Can we say that evaluation is not a priority? I don't think so. So global and regional national campaigns for advocacy on the importance to accelerate progress towards the SDGs, campaigns, advocacy messages on how evaluation contributes to good governance, transparency, credibility, and accountability, establish coalitions or networks with non-traditional actors like parliamentarians to create a demand for evaluation and the SDGs and to respond to the response of the crisis. Parliamentarians are playing a key role in various countries to help create the demand and to hold the governments accountable. Promote evaluation as a political exercise. Remember that the decision to evaluate SDGs is a political decision, and this political decision has technical consequences, and it's not the other way around. Learn from relevant evaluation experiences that already exist, that are documented, like Finland, Nigeria, and Costa Rica, and others, and support countries to integrate evaluation in voluntary national reviews that are presented to the high-level political forum. These are some resources that have been developed by a group of partners that you see there: Finland, IID, Eval SDGs, and UNICEF, in order to building on the experience of the 3 countries I mentioned before. And there are important guidebooks, and this is a guidebook by CLEAR and UNICEF on embedding evaluation in voluntary national review. As very final messages, and I will conclude with this, is that we need advocacy efforts. It is important, otherwise we will not move ahead. As we need advocacy, we also need advocates to be able to position evaluation high in the agenda during these challenging times. Evaluation should be directed to contribute to SDGs acceleration as a first priority. And we need evaluators with renewed competencies, as Silvia has explained in her presentation, and I will just want to focus in one cluster of competencies that deal with the political competencies. Evaluators need to go beyond technical issues, and as country evaluations require political decisions. Evaluation associations, networks, and even international organizations should not limit their events, their books, their activities to talk with evaluators. So this conversation between evaluators and evaluators should be expanded to add evaluation users, to engage policymakers, to engage parliamentarians, to engage foundations, to engage civil societies, etc., and support countries to embed evaluations of the SDGs in national policies and development plans. Of course, partnerships is a key strategy in all these efforts. So thank you very, very much. And together we can walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada. Really fantastic presentation. Our next presenter is James Melanson, Head of the Office of Independent Evaluation at the Caribbean Development Bank. Ada, you'll need to stop the screen share so James can get the screen share privilege.
His mic is off.
James, your
Yep,
microphone
sorry.
should be off. Okay.
Indeed. I started talking and I was muted. So I hope this presentation will complement Ada and Silvia's in the sense that it comes from the perspective of an evaluation function within a development organization and within the Caribbean region. I'd like to outline for you the CDB results architecture, how it connects to the SDGs. I'll just turn my camera off now that I've introduced myself. Have a look at, how well, in fact, this development organization manages its results. Look at the impact of COVID in the region and on CDB programs, and then kind of assess the scope and skills, the M&E scope and skills needed to track these kinds of results from a development organization leading up to the SDGs. So in a nutshell, this is what the Caribbean Development Bank looks like from a strategic point of view. It aims to build resilience, social, economic, and environmental in the Caribbean region. And to do that, it has a number of sectors of engagement under each of those resilience aims. So education, agriculture, etc. On the social side, engaging with the private sector, micro, small, and medium enterprises to build economic resilience. And then, of course, on the environmental side, disaster risk reduction, energy, climate change. That kind of strategic aim is translated into a rudimentary theory of change. I won't dwell on this very long, but it just shows that there is a vertical logic. There is a connection to the SDGs, the highest level, level 1 in the region, which is, the SDGs, but also Paris agreement objectives, disaster risk reduction objectives, to which many organizations contribute. But level 2 is what the Caribbean Development Bank itself focuses on, where its attributable results are, and what it aims to make as a contribution to level 1. Levels 3 and 4 are just how the bank should do its own business better to enhance its outcomes achievement. So that kind of conceptual framework is translated into a results framework, which again reflects the 4 levels. And level 1 here is the SDG level, and here are some indicators, again, that many organizations would strive to contribute to, but which none would be directly attributable for. And then level 2 is in some detail the indicators for the social, economic, and environmental sectors that the bank is attempting to directly achieve outcomes in. So these are over a period of time. There's a comparison between the previous period and the current strategic period, 2020 to 24. This just gives a flavor of the entire results framework. And again, indicators internal that are aimed at improving bank processes to achieve outcomes. So given that that's the results architecture, what the bank is aiming at, how good is it at doing it? And our office is currently engaged in a process to assess that. So we're going to examine results management in the bank. We'll look within the bank, but also in the region, you know, the executing agencies, the national government agencies that the bank engages with, how well can they articulate and manage for results. And the intention is to look at many levels of the organization, individual investments clearly, but also country strategies, sectors, and the overall corporate level, how well the organization reports out on its development performance. So that's a results architecture, an assessment of how well the bank may be planning and managing within that architecture. What's the impact of COVID? So those results were outlined pre-pandemic. This gives you a bit of a picture of how the pandemic has affected the region. So very large falls in gross domestic product across the region. And importantly, at the bottom, big increases in 1 year in indebtedness. So countries' capacity to run programs in the public sector and to take on non-concessional resources greatly diminished. This gives you just a picture of the difference between 2019 and 2020. So the blue bars are modest economic growth pre-pandemic and big decreases, big contractions in GDP in the pandemic year. So this is something the region is going to have to recover from. There is hope. So here are some projections for GDP growth for improvement in 2021, remembering that those are coming from a much diminished base. And I guess to some extent, the indebtedness is not expected to improve in the short term. So what impact has the pandemic had on what the CDB tries to do? Those results frameworks I outlined above. It has reoriented, put out a lot of money just to facilitate debt repayment, modest contributions to personal protective equipment, and a lot of policy-based lending. So trying to relieve the fiscal pressures in the countries in the region, at the same time promoting reforms in the public sector which would put them on a path for more sustainable public finances in the longer term. But what is the longer term going to look like? It's certainly a question mark at this point. So diminished economies, greater indebtedness, perhaps reduced capacities to borrow, and it looks like the grant and concessional funds that come from outside the region will be constrained as well. So what does that mean for monitoring and evaluation of those frameworks and the changes that have taken place? Some things are ongoing, and in big picture, I'm not sure the scope and the skills for monitoring and evaluation that are required are going to change dramatically. There are data constraints in the region, certainly at level 1. How do you track indicators against the SDGs? There hasn't yet emerged in the region a coordinated effort among international and national organizations to put together that kind of data monitoring effort, and that will continue to be a problem. Also, it's a problem at lower levels. At level 2 that I indicated, the availability of secondary data is very limited. So the lending and programming activity of the bank, and I think of other development organizations, will, however, continue in similar sectors as they were pre-pandemic, and the demand for monitoring and evaluation against those programs will continue commensurately. So what kind of monitoring? In the case of this development organization, the CDB, much of the monitoring effort really is done in-house. The bank supervises its projects together with implementing agencies in countries. The exception being infrastructure projects where there are technical and engineering monitoring services required. There are, however, funds that the bank executes on behalf of international organizations and donors, which do require results management and contract monitoring. And in fact, it's becoming more clear, and in fact, through the study that we're doing of the bank's results management systems, that better monitoring is needed to support adaptive management. Changes in programs, even just within the year, require just more agility in results planning and articulation and the monitoring of those. What kind of evaluation? So that's the M side. The E side, this gives a flavor of the kinds of evaluation that a corporate function like ours in a development organization undertakes. These are all higher level evaluations. They generally reflect a portfolio of investments and activities within each evaluation. So disaster risk management would have looked at a large portfolio of interventions across the region to draw out lessons. And likewise for all of these other evaluations that we've undertaken just in the last couple of years. Technical assistance, 300 to 400 activities that would have been reviewed as part of an activity like that. Going forward, similar kinds of activities, different sectors, different countries. We'll be looking at renewable energy, energy efficiency, education, water and sanitation, environmental and social review procedures within the bank, and country strategies of the bank in some of its major borrowing countries. So what skills are in demand for those kinds of activities? In everything that this evaluation function does, we work with outside consulting, evaluation consulting. And common across all of the contracted firms that we bring in is a demand for first-rate knowledge and experience in evaluation design and management, but also in the development context in the region. And then sector expertise depending on the subject matter of the evaluation. But generally, these are multidisciplinary teams with strong content and teams from within the Caribbean region. So they're mixed teams from outside and inside the region. But, you know, given that ongoing context, and those things haven't changed significantly, there are two trends that do reflect change. You know, the COVID period has meant no international travel. So there's been a premium, and I think there will continue to be a premium on evaluation teams that can field people on the ground close to stakeholders and communities that are the targets of the intervention programs. At the same time, there is, as everybody has experienced, a big uptick in remote data collection. And, you know, not just run of the mill, but an ability to be innovative and adaptive in the remote data collection techniques, so that you know, they work well and they come across well to the interview subjects and focus group subjects and surveys, other ways that we're trying to extract primary data for these evaluations. So these both go in different directions, but I think are the necessary complements to get to high quality evaluation evidence. There is an implication to this, and particularly to more remote approaches, and that is that not everybody has access on an equal footing to those technologies. And so there's great care that is going to be needed in approaching evaluations that groups aren't marginalized for lack of access. So what does that mean for evaluators? I think evaluation teams have to look to facilitating access for the communities that are the subject of evaluation exercises. I think they also have to think more deeply and creatively about participatory approaches. Participatory doesn't mean going in, asking questions and leaving, but actually engaging with communities and devising processes where those communities are engaged themselves in tracking and assessing results. And gender equality will just continue to be an important lens in this whole equity dimension of evaluations. So, concluding thoughts. Low growth is going to continue, high indebtedness, constrained concessional resource flows. So the domain that we play in as a development organization, and that many of you are engaged in, is going to be challenging in the coming years. That only means that monitoring and evaluation are more important. You know, with that limited resource pool, doing the right things, doing them the right way, getting value for money based on evidence from evaluations is going to be very important. We'll continue to have secondary data challenges in this region in particular, both for higher level outcomes, but even for just project level outcomes. So well-conducted remote data collection, but balanced with good approaches to direct engagement are going to be increasingly important going forward. And that is where I will conclude. I haven't even heard a bell yet.
Thank you, James. I didn't hear the bell myself, so I don't know what had happened with our technical assistant.
Hi, Nalini. I did ring the bell twice.
Oh, but we didn't hear it for some reason, but thank you anyhow. Thank you, James. Again, another very interesting presentation. We'll now ask Tom to do his presentation.
Let me try this again.
We're seeing your screen, Tom, yes.
You see, okay,
It's in
thank you.
slideshow mode.
Yes, thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be invited to participate in this panel with many of my esteemed colleagues in the field of evaluation. And also I give special thanks to Valerie Gordon and to you, Nadine Persaud, for your enormous efforts in organizing the Global Evaluation Week. I've learned a lot just from listening to the last three presenters. Anyway, in my short presentation here, I want to quickly hit on two things. First, the American Evaluation Association's interest in and commitment to international engagement. And second, the need for transformational change in the practice of M&E to achieve the sustainable development goals in our post-pandemic environment. And now I'm going to just, if I can, whoops. I need to unmute myself to take my picture off view.
Sorry, look at the bottom of your screen, Tom, and there's a mute and a start video. You just need to click on the start video to
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to, and I can't get to it.
Ava, can you turn it off for him, please?
Huh.
It's off, Tom.
It's off. Good.
We have lost your screen share, so you need to open that again.
Okay. I apologize for the difficulties here. Values are drivers for change, and two of AEA's stated core values are the recognition of a global and international community and the enhancement of humanity and our planet. As is seen in our vision statement, these two values are embedded in AEA's policy-based governance model and its operations. AEA is committed to fostering an inclusive, diverse, and international community of practice. And AEA's strong interest in international engagement is certain. AEA has a large international membership. 18% of AEA members are based internationally, and many attend our annual conferences and summer institutes. Through international engagement, AEA's aim is to build on past successes and involvement in order to leverage international evaluation networks and to build international capacities to achieve the SDGs. Strengthening partnerships and engaging strengthening our partnerships and engagement for transformational change by our governments, countries, and local communities is necessary for restructuring efforts to achieve the SDGs. The voluntary organizations for professional evaluation, that's the VOPES, they are formally organized associations of societies, as well as informal networks and communities of practice. They are able to network and to collaborate at international and national and regional levels to build the evaluation capacity of practitioners from cross-disciplinary fields, including governments, academia, non-governmental organizations, as well as individuals. Our international partners can also join AEA's topical interest groups. AEA has some 60 topical interest groups, several of which are relevant to the practice of international evaluators. For example, the Integrating Technology into Evaluation TIG, the International and Cross-Cultural Evaluation TIG, Leadership and Organizational Performance TIG, Organizational Learning and Evaluation Capacity Building TIG, Systems and Evaluation TIG, and the Youth-Focused Evaluation TIG. TIGs offer a valuable way to remain connected, to network and gain knowledge and skills to improve our capacity as professionals in the field of evaluation. AEA's International Working Group is another valuable resource that could be leveraged by IOCE, Eval Partners, Eval for Action, and Eval Youth to facilitate developmental evaluation activities at the ground level that are purposed for achieving the SDGs. The meaning of this slide is to plan with the end in mind. The 17 SDGs link or connect activities that hopefully will accomplish the SDGs. As we know, the SDGs are well defined and supported with reliable quantitative and qualitative evidence. But in today's post-pandemic environment and complex systems, the questions are, what do we do to achieve the goals? What are the capacity gaps? What are the demand gaps? Answering these questions is crucial and will require global leaders in governments and countries to take ownership and establish national frameworks so that local communities can develop and implement policies and programs aimed at accomplishing the SDGs. Only then can ongoing M&E begin the rigorous activity of collecting data to track results. The jazz singer and Rose songwriter, Bernard Igner, wrote, "Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone must change. No one stays the same." So it is with the field of evaluation. Evaluators are change agents and must confront difficult moments in today's challenges. Transformation requires us to get clear about our values and biases, to become skilled in evaluative thinking as we confront complexities in today's realities, to be competent in collecting, analyzing, and using reliable, value-based and evidence-based data, to be capable in using innovative technology and social networks, and to be adept at engaging multiple diverse stakeholders as we conduct evaluations. As evaluators, we must work to understand the complexity of ethical positions on social justice, human rights, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In a nutshell, in order to meet the moment, evaluation must be about rethinking our practice and making necessary changes. What is the now moment? It is a moment of post-pandemic environment and enormous challenges. If we are to increase monitoring and evaluation capacities to achieve the SDGs, we must face a myriad of challenges and become aware of multiple issues, including a digital revolution and big data, technological innovations, connectivity and globalization networks, and community coalitions and collaborations, just to name a few. I believe a new normal leads us towards the necessary healthy transformation of the practice of evaluation. Our success in this effort requires truth and healing. It means engaging our hearts, being the change we need, clarifying what we want to see happen. It means balancing control with letting go. It means having a focus on what is happening right now, and it requires addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Effective transformation will require M&E evaluators not only to network, coordinate, and cooperate, but also to collaborate. That is, exchange information, alter activities, share resources, take risks, and enhance each other's evaluation capacity for a common purpose, bettering humankind and planet Earth. One last thought. In the current evaluation environment, the Gen Xers, that's the millennials, and the Gen Zers, those that are born after 1997, are young and emerging evaluators. Generally, they are technology savvy, collaborative, digitally fluent, practical, and self-confident. They have core values of civic duty and achievement, and they are racially and ethnically diverse and shrewd consumers. These work traits and values will be critical in the transformation of evaluation practice and will greatly facilitate the achievement of the SDGs. We should remember that these young and emerging evaluators need mentoring and guidance from seasoned evaluation professionals. As was said earlier, the global evaluation landscape is changing in time from what was, where it is, and where it is going. In conclusion, I quote Antoine de Saint-Exupéry: "Aimer ce n'est pas se regarder l'un autre, c'est regarder ensemble dans la même direction." That is, to love is not to look at each other, it is looking together in the same direction. And thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your insights on this topic. I'll now invite our final panelist, Valerie, our very own CI president, to conclude the panel discussion, and then we'll open for questions.
Thank you, Nadini. And as I cue my presentation here, I just really want to express appreciation for the non-hesitation of all of the speakers to join us in this week. We were involved in the very first gLOCAL evaluation week, and found it to be a really valuable way to, share the knowledge and make people understand a little bit more in our own Caribbean corner what's the importance of M&E for development in the region. So Nadini has already mentioned what CEI is: a network of monitoring, evaluation, and development professionals focused on advancing evaluative practice in the Caribbean. We recognize that unlike other professional associations where you may have like associations of architects, engineers, and so on, which are relatively close and well-defined, we understand evaluation to be a transdiscipline, and that a broader cross-section of development practitioners need to be involved in various capacities other than just direct evaluation. Our vision, the CEI's vision for the region is a Caribbean where M&E is integral to development. That means it will be used by a variety of stakeholders, civil society, non-government organizations, governments at all levels. That commissioners are familiar with good M&E practice. In many ways, we see commissioners who maybe cut and paste terms of reference. They have little understanding of, you know, what good indicators look like, or you know, the real questions that need to be answered in order to say, was this initiative successful? And also, obviously, to influence them to understand that there is a cadre of Caribbean evaluators in the region that can be used for M&E activities. We see a region where practitioners contribute and share actively their knowledge and experiences. Obviously, VOPES, such as the CEI and our national affiliates, have a major contribution to make in this aspect. And finally, that Caribbean evaluators are part of international teams so that they can bring that cultural perspective to evaluators who may come into the region, you know, commissioned by others. Let's see if I can move this out of here. Okay, so the mission of the CEI is to share and develop knowledge and experiences around Caribbean monitoring and evaluation through capacity, developing events, sharing resources, linking peers, and offering mentorship. We also want to be able to strengthen the understanding of M&E of Caribbean interventions by stakeholders. And finally, to create materials and participate in regional and international development discourse to strengthen our effective involvement in M&E at all levels. This is our geographic reach. Most of you are familiar with that map. We have members from Haiti, Jamaica, Grenada, Dominica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Barbados, as well as in the diaspora, the UK, the USA, Canada, and even the Netherlands. Our profile, I would be interested to know if our gender split in the region is heavily female. So we have just under 70 fully paid members, but we interact with a broader network of up to 120 to 125 persons who attend events, webinars, etc. It's largely female dominated, just about 16% males. We want to get that balance a little bit more equal. An analysis of the affiliations of our members shows that about 28% are independent consultants. About 14 work with the governments of the region. International development partners make up 10%. That's individuals that work with IDPs. NGOs, 17%. Tertiary institutions, 8%. And we have a group of undetermined 23%. I believe it may be, I have a feeling a lot of these are really independent because they kind of list a range of organizations that they work with. So it appears that, you know, they do work for several different types of organizations. So we have to drill down further to identify those. So the current strategic priorities of the CEI, which we developed in 2019, is to engage and support CEI members' networking, knowledge sharing, and professional development, to advance the visibility and involvement of CEI in monitoring and evaluation globally, and to advocate for quality M&E practice in the region. How did we get here? So the CEI started in 2014. I have to say that we owe a debt of gratitude to pretty much all of the organizations who are represented on this panel. The genesis of the organization was influenced by the 2013 Ideas Conference meeting in Barbados, Ideas Conference in Barbados, which was also supported by the CDB. The intention at that time was that a group of persons, and it was largely government employees who had been invited, especially supported by the CDB, to form an association. However, you know our legacy in the region. Most of the CARICOM, obviously the CARICOM countries are, former British colonies, and the dreaded Official Secrets Act made, I believe, a number of the persons who attended a little reticent to step out beyond their roles as government civil servants to undertake an activity which at that time, and to a great extent even now, represents the downside of evaluation, they think, is that it criticizes governments. And so there's a reticence for them to put themselves in that position. Many thought it was a conflict of interest. Nonetheless, a group of other evaluators got together, saw the opportunity, and felt it was important that the Caribbean was represented in the global M&E community. So we were encouraged by the IOCE and to establish a VOPE. We were registered in Jamaica, developed a draft constitution, and established an initial board. This timeline kind of captures the movement of our trajectory. So 2015, we developed a first strategic plan, and 2016, we had our draft constitution prepared and co-hosted the Caribbean Urban Forum that enabled us to kind of put a face to our organization on the regional front. In 2017, thanks to support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we were invited to AFRIA, and based on the stellar work of individuals such as Denise Baptiste, Claudia Nicholson, persons like that who were heavily engaged in this South-South dialogue online, it kind of mushroomed. We actually met at an AEA meeting together with Elvis Fraser, then the Bill and Melinda Gates representative. And he started the dialogue. We met with the head of AFRIA, and we went to the conference in Uganda. And that was, 8 of us were sponsored. That was very pivotal, I think, in our development and our gelling as a professional body. We also started the evaluation chat newsletter at around that time. In 2018, we elected a new board, and with the support of the CDB again, and Kaya Ambrose, I thought she came into the room. We convinced James to sponsor Kaya to come to Jamaica to assist us in developing a strategic plan for our organization, and we really appreciate that. That is a strategic plan that we're still implementing. In 2019, we started our webinar series, and yes, that's when the strategic plan was developed. 2020, We became an integral part of the Eval for Action campaign, which continues now. And even as, you know, they're co-sponsoring some of these events, promoting them widely, and have asked us to undertake a sub-regional consultation before the end of the year. So we'll be looking at that, you know, as soon as we overcome the burnout from this event. Since 2021, of course, we're now in Eval Week. We have some summer offerings coming up in collaboration with Salinas, who incidentally we had partnered for the initial, we had partnered with Salinas for the initial Eval Week in 2000, I think it was 19. So we continue to be partners with them, and together we're developing some summer offerings to provide some basic skills in M&E. More on that later. Those will be hopefully accredited by the university, so persons will, you know, will have that confidence that it's of a certain level. And as I mentioned already, the sub-regional consultations coming up, and we will also be embarking on this mentorship program. So much has been said about the YEEs. Our very first session under this theme of building forward better really involved some experts who spoke eloquently about the importance of involving YEEs. We had representatives from Eval Youth, and this is continued some discussions we'd had in Prague, 2019, I believe, at the IDEAS conference, that a Caribbean Eval Youth grouping was well overdue. So that is something we're going to put into action very quickly. So, I mean, we've identified some of our successes as these. Believe we have established a solid regional and international footprint, mainly through the various strategic partnerships and alliances with entities such as IOCE, IDEAS, CDB, and Salinas. It was mentioned in another presentation, the importance of these alliances and the effort that it takes to build and maintain them. They are very valuable, however, and something that we will persist and pursue going forward. We've been involved, as I mentioned before, in the international dialogue on the South to South initiative, and we were given the opportunity at the time of the Prague, or in preparation, while preparing for the Prague IDEAS conference in 2019, we were given the opportunity to contribute to the IDEAS publication, Evaluation for Transformational Change. A number of us contributed to that, but it was really brought together by Lenise Baptiste. And, you know, we got quite a bit of recognition for that effort. We believe a major part of our success is the dedicated talent and the commitment of our board members. None of this could be possible without them. We recognize the establishment of 2 national VOPES, functional VOPES, Jamaica and Barbados, and we salute them for their efforts and look forward to continuing to support them as they engage at the national level. Our engagement in the Eval for Action campaign, which really kind of triggers undertaking regular webinars to promote the theme of No One Left Behind. We do face a number of challenges. We are a very small body with only voluntary labor. We have no institutional sustaining financial support. It's always an uphill battle to establish national VOPEs and develop influence in the context of scarce resources and the new imperative for transformational evaluation. The Caribbean is still a bit behind in even recognizing the need for basic evaluation. So the whole concept of transformational evaluation will take a kind of leapfrog approach, which, you know, is something that we have to gear up for we do have a fairly young cohort of members who require training, mentorship, and guidance to develop the requisite skills and experience to respond to the many demands for M&E to support progress towards the SDGs. And finally, the majority of experienced members have very little time. Many of us, I think 90% of the board members are actually independent consultants. And so we put in the effort, you know, as we have the time. But, and again, this is why I have to applaud the dedication. So, but there's limited time to engage with the non-work related activities such as mentorship and the demand for providing work experience to new and emerging evaluators. Well, coming out of this Eval week, there are a number of takeaways for us. And we have to have a whole session to put it all together. But some of the things that we had already started thinking about and will continue for sure is the establishment of this mentorship program for young and emerging evaluators. We'll also establish a partnership with Eval Youth, LAC. When we met with Gerardo in Prague, he'd mentioned that the Caribbean was still missing from the LAC. So we definitely want to fill that slot and look forward to doing that. The delivery of summer courses, initially in results-based management with Salinas, accredited by the university in order to provide a basic skill set. Establishment of a base of institutional sustaining funding for the CEI operations. And continued advocacy for more and better evaluations so that we can increase efficiencies and effectiveness in national and regional actions towards the achievement of the SDGs. Ultimately, we want to establish a body of knowledge on Caribbean evaluative practice and the added value that these bring. And I'm so pleased that Nadine has been so inspired that she's going to take this up wholeheartedly at the end of this event. And we're looking very much forward to that. I have to say that her latest book on, can't remember the full title, but on SDGs was really inspired because she was called on to contribute to that chapter of the ideas publication in 2019. And she said because of the amount of work she had to do to collect the information, she realized that a book was important. And so we look forward to that book being launched this month. Finally, I would just say that despite our many challenges, VOPES like the CEI have a very big role to play in ensuring that the next generation of evaluators and the transformative approaches necessary to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs are raised up and advocated for. Because of our many interactions with various types of clients, various countries in the region, we are very well suited to be ambassadors for the cause. I found myself many times in the position advocating for the development agency that may have hired me to do an evaluation, explaining their processes and promoting their work in a meaningful way that makes sense to the stakeholders so that they would be more willing and forthcoming in their participation in the activity. So I think we're all trained diplomats, and I think we can put those skills to use in very many ways. We are generally more flexible and nimble than large government bureaucracies that have many parts to move to make meaningful change happen. We heard about the difficulty with training cohorts of government personnel, and then they move on. I would like to put forward that VOPEs such as ourselves maintain a consistent cadre of persons with capacities that can support regional and national activities. And so we would like to advocate for investment in our efforts to keep the lights on, to, reduce the burden on those of us who, carry the brunt of the work, and to really push forward. We know that change happens at the fringes, and we're certainly on the fringes. If the governments can be looked at as steamships or cruise ships, we VOPES can be looked at as the tugboats that bring them into shore, or the pilot boat that have to guide them through the waters. So I'm advocating for equal support for VOPES to undertake this transformational work. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So we're at 7:31. I do want to get to some questions, but I really, really wanted to thank our very distinguished panel of presenters for their invaluable presentations. I personally found them so invaluable because I'm currently writing a new book chapter, and I just have really rich data to cite now. So I'm going to be spending some good time going through these presentations again to actually get some citations from them. There's so many takeaways, but for me, the most important thing is the work that the CEI and every one of us here this week that has been a panelist or a member of the audience, because we're interested in evaluation, our role in helping the region to develop a culture for evidence-based data and M&E. Our region has to start to value data as the very lifeblood of decision-making and see M&E as critical tools that can help policymakers to prioritize activities in the face of serious financial constraints. I think this has been the overarching message from all of the presentations this week. Each and every panelist individually spoke about the lack of proper data in the region, the challenges with collecting data, and the culture. There's no culture for M&E within the region. And we have a formidable task ahead of us in terms of how we're going to strategize. Whose role is it really to try to promote and build this culture? I think all of us individually do try as an evaluator when we are in the field or as an academic through our scholarly writing to promote it. But James, I think the CDB and the OECS and the CARICOM and everyone has to also make some, I'm not saying that you're not doing it, but maybe you have more clout than the individual evaluators in helping to build this culture. I will go back quickly to Ada's slide evaluation and the SIDS acceleration, what to do. She spoke about evaluations for good governance. I would add there, Ada, evaluations and evidence-based data for good governance. Allocating resources for evaluation, I would add in there, and for evidence-based data collection. Joining the region, the global and regional efforts to advocate for evidence-based policy decisions and M&E policy-based decisions. I'd add both the data collection and M&E to each of those points. And the demand for evaluation capacity development and support and M&E support as well. I really don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot, as Valerie said, because I'm really now quite interested in the scholarly aspect of this and how I can help the region to develop and build a culture through scholarly work. And as Valerie said, it was Ada, thank you to Ideas and for contacting Linus, who then contacted me. That inspired my book, as she said. But I was also really inspired of thinking of a framework for how we could develop this culture. And I cannot see it any other way. And I'm curious to know what you, the panelists, think about. I mean, how we would go about this and actually accomplish it. Because I cannot see it happening unless it gets top level support and buy-in. And as Ada said, walk the talk. The institutions need to commit to an M&E policy. It has to be a formal organizational policy. And seriousness of intent, I believe, would be shown when an annual budget line item is actually allocated in the organization's budget for M&E. So I'm going to conclude there because it's 7:35. I want to check some of the questions that are in the chat. But I'm curious if any of the panelists wanted to comment on what I said about whose role, apart from the individual promotion and lobbying for evaluation and evidence-based data that all of us as evaluators do, what role can the regional institutions, I know they do their small part, but how important is it for them to be at the forefront of these discussions? Panel, if anyone wants to respond.
Yes, Nadine, Valerie here. So yes, this whole approach is something that has to be really strategically developed, because there's a multiplicity of partners and moving parts that have to come together to make it happen. And I think it really is a worthwhile effort that development partners in the region should embrace, take up, and support. And certainly it is well within the what our discipline and our training to help to promote such a development. So I fully agree that this is something that really has to happen, and happen quickly, particularly because of the myriad developmental challenges that the region faces. And there's really no time to waste in ensuring that scarce resources are well used, effectively accounted for, and that the important results are made known. So learning also has to be a very important part of the processes that we undertake, because up to now it's kind of been an add-on. It's the shortest part of maybe any evaluation report, but it's something that should be mainstreamed and put up front.
Thank you, Valerie. I saw several questions about hearing more about the examples Silvia mentioned with regards to success and rethinking indicators. She did put in the chat that you could email her, and she left her email message address there. So you can email her to get that conversation going. I also saw in the chat that people were complaining about the size of the slides. Strangely enough, I was seeing my slides very large on my screen, so I'm not sure what is happening, but just for your information, the sessions are being recorded and you will be able to access the recordings. Let me see what else is in here. This one is from Luis to Ada. Can you share thoughts about moving from response to recovery, ensuring no one is left behind without us addressing responsibility, accountability? It seems to me that evaluation has a crucial role here, if only to ensure we learn the necessary lessons to avoid and better manage future responses.
Yes, that's more a comment than the question, but it's a very, very interesting comment. Of course, accountability, transparent are principles underlying good governance, right? And therefore, if we see the importance of evaluation playing a role in informed evidence-based decisions for transition to recovery, then I think we can promote through advocacy, through discussions, through dialogue, through mobilizing international organizations, etc. But the important thing is just that in this current situation, we have government reporting on data, and data is important. But when we are able to count, but to count critically, we are talking about evaluative evidence. So therefore data is important, but it's not enough when it comes to analyze progress or responses with a no left behind lenses. I don't know whether I can take advantage of this opportunity. I saw early another question.
Yes, there are two other questions here for you. Can you share your thoughts about moving from response to recovery, ensuring no one is left behind without addressing responsibility? Oh, sorry, that's the same one. Can you expand your statement? Country evaluation require political decisions.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I really thank you for that question. Yeah, because it also says in the question that it's supposed to be a value-free exercise, right? Evaluation as a value-free exercise, I would say it's a very old paradigm that in certain circumstances or dimensions is still valid. But what do I refer with the political dimensions? First, if countries, if we are in the frame of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and we are talking that countries are at the driver's seat, and we advocate and we push, for example, Nigeria decided to undertake 2 SDGs evaluations after a training organized by UNICEF and CLEAR, Anglophone Africa, for the African countries. So after the training, so these people that were in the training were back to Nigeria, decided to advocate for that. So they had to convince the government. So if you need to influence the government, you need to influence for a political decision to happen. And therefore you cannot explain about evaluability, about indicators, about regression. You cannot talk to the government as if they were evaluators. So you have to explain the political dimension at the national level. What difference evaluation is going to make? Why is it important? What's going to happen if decisions are being taken without evaluative evidence? In some occasions, you even have to show rival hypotheses. And this, for example, happened in Nigeria with another evaluation that was about child registration. There were regions and regions in Nigeria where children were not registered at birth. And the government had a policy on that, but the policy was not really showing effectiveness. And they didn't want to change the policy because they were so proud that they had the policy already. So how did the influence took place? Well, the influence took place by political discussions, dialogues, why it is important to change that policy, and at the end, by showing rival hypotheses, what is happening with the current strategy, and a simulation of what would happen with a different strategy. So with that, the government was convinced. So then, if the government decides to do the evaluation, has to put money on it as well, has to get the buy-in of others, has to get the buy-in of the Congress, for example, has to get resources, and those are political decisions. Then once the decision has been taken, there are technical implications for that. It's only then that the discussion on the evaluation design takes place, the evaluation questions and the methodology and why this and why that. But then the technical implications start, but still it's not a value-free exercise. It will depend on your questions, because if your questions are asking who is being left behind, whether there is equal access to services, whether inequities are the same, or whether women and men are benefiting or being affected in the same way, and the recommendations state the need to change policies, to reform policies. Those are also political implications. And the evaluator needs to be aware of that and need to be able to read the context, the national context. For the SDGs evaluation, the evaluator needs to be able to read the national context. And as we all know, the national context is not only a technical context. The national context is a social context, it's a political context, it's a complex ecosystem where the evaluation will take place. Therefore, the evaluator has to be able to understand that context to be able to do a meaningful and therefore useful evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you.
There were some hands raised,
Yeah.
Nalini.
Oh, okay, I'll go to those hands. I see a question here for James. Can James comment on who is best placed to marshal an effort to address this consistent data policy in the region? Let me go back. So James, you can go ahead and let me see these hands that are raised.
Sure. I'm not sure I can say definitively who it would be. I can say who some of the players would have to be. I think clearly CARICOM, the UN system, perhaps UE, CDB. Who the marshal is, perhaps CARICOM. And I believe that, you know, this isn't necessarily within the purview of evaluation functions to sort of support regional data collection and capacity efforts. There are other parts of the organization, but I believe there are some activities going on in this area.
Thank you, James. Alexa, you can go ahead and open your microphone and ask your question directly, please.
Okay, well, it's a couple of comments. So the first one is when we're talking about capacity development and in the region, and I've been involved in that since about 2002, so it's almost 20 years. There's still, I think, a disconnect between capacity development and the old culture we have, especially in the public sector, of expenditure focus. They focus on, you know, have you spent the money, and if you haven't spent it, your budget will be cut the next year and so on, rather than a focus on outcomes, which many countries do have in their long-term plans, but the focus is not on that component. What tends to happen a lot of times is with capacity development, and I think Valerie mentioned people moving on, but it is not only that, it is often that the structure within ministries is not there to permit any kind of real evaluation function. And so that is also something that needs to be worked on in terms of, you know, the infrastructure within ministries, or trying to figure out if we need to have external M&E units, external to the ministry, not necessarily reporting to the PS, which has its own challenges, but maybe reporting to a Ministry of Planning and Finance. Secondly, I just wanted to say the use of evaluation findings. I was wondering from James, if in looking at the bank's MFDR, if they're looking at the extent to which the bank has used over time evaluation findings, either in decision-making or to feedback into the design of projects, future projects, etc. That's just a question. I don't know if that's part of the MFDR assessment. Finally, Nandini, with regard to the issue of why the region doesn't value data, I'm wondering if that is because there is a clear understanding of what data means in terms of accountability. And I remember in the 70s or during the oil boom in Trinidad, when Eric Williams said planning has lost its mystique, and therefore we didn't need to use evidence and statistics in our economic planning models. And that was basically the beginning of the end of our Central Statistical Office. It has never recovered. Up to this day, I don't even know if there's a functioning CSO in Trinidad. And it was one of the best ones in the region at the time. I think part of the issue is across the region, there is an understanding of data and evidence, but what that also means is accountability. And I think that is probably the core issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexa. James, you wanted to respond to that question?
Yes, I would say the MFDR study we're doing focuses more on the monitoring side. We happen to be doing a separate exercise reviewing the evaluation policy, which may look a little more, Alexa, at the question of use of evaluation in the organization.
Thank you, James. Any other questions? Because I think what was in the chat were mostly observations, comments, and no more questions. Anybody else had a question they wanted to place on via the microphone.
I think I saw a hand.
I am not seeing any more
Okay.
hands. I think that may have been Alexa's hand that wasn't taken down as yet.
I think Anne Bramble had her hand up, but I don't know what happened.
Anne, do you have a question?
It was really more a comment.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of building capacity in M&E in the region. I mean, I've been around for a long time, and a lot of money has been spent on training people throughout the region. Why nothing happens, I think the Secretary General spoke to some of that, but perhaps we need to think of taking it to the next stage. It is not only just training these people or training individuals. We need to show or have examples of successes in terms of the evaluations that have been done, where evaluations may have informed policy. I'm not sure that in terms of the communication aspect that knowledge is known. I remember speaking with CAFRA the other day. They have done a lot of research, a lot of work is being done. And that, that the use of the evaluation perhaps may be a way to get people to get the buy-in. And that may be something that we can take on board, in terms of the advocacy aspect of it. Because I think that part is a bit deficient in the region, and why we're not getting the buy-in to evaluations. Yes, I understand the accountability. Yes, there's that part of it also. But the fact that it works and it's being used, I think more information needs to be put out there in terms of some of the success stories.
Okay, Anne, so I think the only way we can really get that out is through forums like this and also through scholarship. So maybe we just need to, have a journal especially dedicated to this topic, or maybe a book that, brings together 24 essays or something with a success story that different evaluators submit. So it's something I'm going to think about as the Director of Professional Development as we move towards the end of the year, because I'm bogged down with a number of things working on at the moment. So any other questions from any of the panelists? Okay. So today we have heard from a very distinguished panel. Our panel comprised Silvia Salinas Mulder. She has left already, President of International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation. Ada Ocampo, President, IDES. James Melanson, Head of the Office of Independent Evaluation at the Caribbean Development Bank. Tom Grayson, President of the American Evaluation Association, and Valerie Gordon, President of Caribbean Evaluators International. I would like to thank all of our panelists for their very valuable insight and for agreeing to be a part of our panel today. I know, even though Tom told me what he had was not that important, that our time always has an opportunity cost. So you could have been doing something better with your time, but you chose to be here with CEI and share with our members your thoughts and your insight on the topic. So we really, really appreciate that. You can't imagine how much we actually do. I would also like to express thanks to our panelists and to our technical assistants, Ava and Kenal, for doing a fantastic job in helping us to navigate any challenges with the technology. And to the CEI Board of Directors for working diligently to coordinate and make possible these sessions. The CEI will continue to present activities such as this to build the evaluation culture in the region, to help us to ask and find answers to the questions that will help us to achieve sustainable development, to improve the quality of all of our lives. We also have one more presentation taking place tomorrow. So we ask our audience, particularly if you're a new emergent evaluator, as Tom spoke to, you're very innovative, etc., but you still need to get some of the basic skills. So tomorrow, that session on the skills that you need to function as a good practicing evaluator would be especially valuable for you. I just wanted to make one more comment on something Valerie had said about her statistics on us having more women than men in the profession. And Valerie, I have to tell you that I think I had gotten those statistics directly from AEA about 10 years ago, and it was the same issue with considerably more women in comparison to men as members of AEA. It is also a phenomenon at the University of the West Indies, where we have 2/3 of our graduates being women and just 1/3 being men. So the tables have really changed from the early 1940s, when women were not even allowed and encouraged to pursue education. So I'm not sure if that is empowerment to women, or if we need to be concerned about what's happening with the males. Maybe it's a situation of both. So I, once again, thank you to all of our panelists, and I wish everyone a fantastic evening.
Thank you, Nadini. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was excellent. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Sounds
Bye-bye.
great. Bye.
Thank you very much, Nadini and colleagues. Good evening.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Nadine.
Thank you, James.
Bye-bye. Bye all.